As a quiet moment, anyway, she reckons the government is not getting enough praise. There was a few Fs and Jeffs in there as well, but I wonder, what do you think to that? Do you agree with her? Do you think the media is just too quick to give the government a kicking? Or do you think, actually, love, do you know what? Your timing ain't that great given the schools debacle that we are experiencing today, and Labour as well. They have done quite a big cabinet, shadow cabinet reshuffle. It's got me wondering, do you think they are a serious government in waiting? Is this the next government unfolding in front of our very eyes? And pensions, are they a ticking time bomb? So many questions for you tonight. Are we saving enough for our retirement? Is the retirement age right? Should it be older? And how on earth are we going to pay for all of these pensions that are coming our way? And IPP, do you know what that is? It's basically when you're imprisoned for public protection. Basically, you have no idea if or when you will be released. I'm not talking about your lunatics like your Lucy Letbys and people like that. I'm talking about people that often haven't really committed crimes that are that serious. Anyway, should these things even be a thing or not? So we've got it all to come, but before we do, let's bring ourselves up to speed with tonight's latest headlines.
Thanks, Michelle. I'm Ray Addison in the GB newsroom. Our top stories. The Education Secretary has confirmed a list of schools affected by the concrete crisis will be published this week. Comes after Gillian Keegan was heard expressing her frustration at the situation in an unusually frank, expletive-ridden hot mic moment.
Does anyone ever say, you know what, you've done a good job because everyone else has sat on their and done nothing? No signs of that, no?
Well, Ms Keegan has since apologised for her use of language.
Well, it wasn't me talking about anyone in particular. It was an off-the-cuff remark after the news interview had finished, or apparently after it had finished. And I'd like to apologise for my choice language. That was unnecessary. But it was an off-the-cuff remark, basically, you know, based on the interview. The interview had been pressing me quite hard, you know, why I hadn't solved this issue, which had been going on since 1994.
The Prime Minister has attempted to bat away accusations regarding his role in the crisis while he was Chancellor. The government is under increasing pressure to explain how they'll keep schools safe from a kind of concrete that's prone to collapse as children return to school. Rishi Sunak saying it's wrong to suggest that he is to blame for failing to fully fund a programme to rebuild England's schools when he was Chancellor.
Of course, I know the timing is frustrating, but I want to give people a sense of the scale of what we're grappling with here. There are around 22,000 schools in England, and the important thing to know is we expect that 95% of those schools won't be impacted by this. Around 50 schools have already been mitigated, another 100 are in the process of being so, and you know, our expectation is in a matter of weeks, the bulk of the remaining schools that will have this issue will be identified as well.
Northern Ireland's police chief, Simon Byrne, has resigned. A recent court ruling deemed that Mr Byrne's disciplinary actions against two junior officers were unlawful. It follows a major data breach last month, which revealed the details of 10,000 PSNI staff. Edgar Jardine, Vice Chair of the Northern Ireland Policing Board, says integrity is of the utmost importance in the service.
The board is very clear. We expect the highest standard of professionalism and integrity from all our police officers in line with the Code of Ethics. And the Police Service of Northern Ireland has taken a very strong view, or a very strong position, which the board supports, of ensuring that we can account on the highest standards of behaviour within the police service.
UK government sources have confirmed that French police have stopped more than 15,000 migrants from reaching the UK in small boats so far this year. GB News can reveal that tougher French policing around some key migrant launch points has significantly disrupted people smuggling activities. One source told us gangs are being forced to move much further south along the French coast to try to avoid enhanced police patrols. Although 872 people arrived on 15 small boats on Saturday, the overall number of Channel migrants is more than 20% down when compared to the same period last year. The Health Secretary has appointed Lady Justice Thirlwall to head up the inquiry into crimes committed by child serial killer Lucy Letby. Steve Barclay says the inquiry will have legal powers to compel witnesses to provide evidence. That's expected to include former and current staff of the Countess of Chester Hospital NHS Foundation Trust, where Letby worked. Angela Rayner is the new Shadow Deputy Prime Minister and Levelling Up Secretary as Sir Keir Starmer reshuffles his top team. She replaces Lisa Nandy, who becomes Shadow Cabinet Minister for International Development. Among the other changes, Pat McFadden takes on the influential role of National Campaign Coordinator, as well as Shadow Chancellor of the Duchy of Lancaster. An independent review says former Cabinet Minister Sir Gavin Williamson should apologise to MPs for bullying the former Chief Whip. He sent offensive text messages to Wendy Morton after he wasn't invited to the late Queen's funeral. The panel says Sir Gavin should also take part in appropriate behaviour training. This is GB News across the UK on TV, in your car, on digital radio and on your smart speaker by saying play GB News.
Direct Bullion sponsors the Finance Report on GB News for gold and silver investment.
Let's get a quick snapshot of today's markets. The pound will buy you $1.2622 and 1.1690 euros. Price of gold, £1,535.78 per ounce. And the FTSE 100's closed the day at 7,452 points.
Direct Bullion sponsors the Finance Report on GB News, investments that matter.
Thanks for that. I'm Michelle Dewberry with you till 7 o'clock tonight. Alongside me, my panel, the PR consultant, Alex Dean, and the former Labour advisor, Scarlett Maguire. Good evening to both of you. It was like a Herculean effort to get in here tonight, wasn't it?
I know. Well, the tube didn't stop at Paddington, but they didn't tell us until after the doors had closed. So I had to walk from Royal Oak. Well, if I was in better condition, I would have run.
No messing around. She's a grafter, isn't she? None of this whole kind of civil service, kind of work from the beach kind of attitude. That's not what we have on Dewbs and Co. Come hell or high water, we're in here, aren't we? No strikes, nothing can deter us, I can tell you. Anyway, what's on your mind tonight? Get in touch with me. All the usual ways, gbviews@gbnews.com is how you email me, or you can tweet me at GBNews. Of course, the thing that's dominating a lot of the conversation tonight is the Education Secretary, Gillian Keegan. She has been recorded on camera suggesting, I think actually I'll have play you a clip so you can listen to what she had to say.
But we will get a plan and every single one of them will be done.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Does anyone ever say, you know what, you've done a good job because everyone else has sat on their ass and done nothing? No signs of that, no?
Spicy. What did you think to that? Was you sitting there going, actually, do you know what? Pack it in. She's just a human being, after all, a little bit frustrated with the interview, as she says it was aimed at. Although, who knows, the mind boggles. Alex has been in touch saying, Dewbs, she's got you all talking about her swearing now and not the schools crisis. He reckons, or she reckons, Alex, that this perhaps was a PR coup.
Well, I like Alex's name, but I don't like Alex's theory because... I mean, people always see conspiracy behind everything. I can tell you this is not the dream of your average spinner, and you've got two here with you. And the person who advises the Secretary of State is behind the camera, head in hands, when this sort of thing happens. Look, on the one hand, you can argue, Secretary of State, lot on her plate. We all, from time to time, say something in what we think is a private conversation we might not wish to be broadcast on international television and shared globally on the internet. On the other hand, most of us doing media training learn very quickly to treat every camera as if it's live. And I think that's a useful lesson, once again, underscored today.
Well, yes. I mean, if any of you guys have watched since the start of GB News, you would be familiar. I was once thrown on air in the middle of an ad break. I had absolutely no idea how I was not saying
yes, you were
some
telling a story. You were to me, in fact.
Yeah, how I was not saying some choice. Instead, I was putting my lipstick on. I got off mildly, I can tell you.
Well, but actually, that's you, right? And the problem with, I mean, Alex, of course, is completely right, and the rule is you never ever speak in front of a microphone because it always might be on. But the problem with it is she's feeling sorry for herself, and I mean, it's incredible. She's had a whole summer to sort this one out, and then she says to the parents, no, you can't go, you can't get your kids back to school. Parents are furious. they are in bits. Nobody quite knew whether it was their school or not. I mean, and then she
But
says...
that's not the order of events, though, is it? And this is what I think she's getting frustrated about, because you're saying she had a whole summer to sort this out. If you believe at face value what the government are telling us, what Gillian, etc., are saying to us, what Nick Gibb, the school minister, was saying as well, what has happened? So the reason that this has all become apparent and, you know, all kind of very last minute is apparently over the last kind of few weeks, a few beams, I think there was 3 or something panels, which had previously been listed as non-critical, so i.e., you know, no edge and you don't need to close it down tomorrow. Some of those things had then collapsed, which had then made the government reassess proactively, do you know what, we need to accelerate this and do it now.
Actually, these warnings had been going on for years. I mean, a beam collapsed in a school in Kent.
In 2018?
Yeah, absolutely.
Primary school.
And actually, that's when they should have checked every school. I mean, no question. I mean, Gillian Keegan's right. She's had... I've forgotten how many. Is it 5 education secretaries before her who didn't do anything? Gavin Williamson didn't take any notice of anything the whole time, and she's got to pick up the pieces, and so she's cross. So in that way, she's right. But actually, they have had warning after warning after warning, and nobody did anything.
So
that's the problem.
Let's put aside the language she uses. I take your point about why blame the person who's actually doing something rather than those who didn't do something and predated that person in the role. But of course, the use of this material in construction dates back, I think it's the 50s to the 90s. And the point is that a lot of these schools were built with a 30-year planned life. Well, first of all, that seems a remarkably short-sighted thing to do, but let's put it to one side. We needed more schools, and that's how we built. It's not just in schools. It's in hospitals, magistrates' courts, other kinds of municipal buildings. And plenty of hospitals, some I know, are, you know, they've got metal struts that have been put around to hold up these beams and areas of rotting, effectively, concrete or insufficiently stable concrete. The point being, I think, that people thought it was, you know, bad but stable. And then at some point, if you know, these are the facts we've been given. At some point over the summer, it became clear that at least in some cases that was wrong. But the previous assumptions that it was a reliable rate of decay and you could work out when you needed to act, those assumptions no longer applied and things were posed danger. And then I suppose you've actually got to give some credit to a government minister who says, you know what, I'm going to get this in the neck. Schools are supposed to open next week, but everywhere this applies, we're not going to open the school.
And what happened if one beam fell down?
Exactly. Exactly.
I mean, that was. I mean, I actually think. I think it's what's so amazing about this building a school for 30 years is that both my children, who went to different primary schools because we moved house, were in Victorian schools that are still there and still have people going in and out, and both schools have been there for 100 years. And so, Alex, you're completely right that actually this short-termism, which, and I'm not blaming either party, right? It's politicians, absolutely, is the problem. But I mean, the Shadow Secretary of State for Education asked 156 times about school buildings. I mean, school buildings have been a...
What do you mean she was asked 156
She asked in Parliament over 100 times, over 150 times, what is happening about school buildings. This wasn't just crumbling concrete. I mean, there are real problems about school buildings. And ironically, when she was at school in the 90s, because she's very young compared to me, she was taught, I don't know whether it was crumbling concrete, but she was taught in classrooms with struts. And says that actually it's pretty awful being taught like that.
I was just reflecting on what you just made me. It's what alcoholics call a moment of clarity when you realise you're the same age as the Secretary of State you're talking about. So I was at school in the 90s too, at least when I left school, but I was at primary school in the 80s and I had a middle school, it was a 3-school system. And each of them, my primary, middle and upper school, all had, terrapins. They all had little, like, caravan units, statics that we were taught in. Each of the schools, we had classrooms that you were in for at least a home year where they were like these big static caravan things. And so school buildings have been inadequate in our state system for some time.
One of the things that I was quite interested in is she was expressing a frustration today, Gillian Keegan, when she was caught on the microphone. Yeah. And when she was probed in a follow-up interview about who was that aimed at, I think it was aimed aimed, I think what she was kind of saying was it was aimed at the interview. The interview was probing her. And then she went on to say that actually she's put out all these questionnaires to these schools and she's not got a big response. So I thought to myself, if I was Gillian Keegan, I would now be mindful to perhaps consider naming and shaming the schools, because if what she is saying is true, that this situation is elevated to critical, if you've got schools that for whatever reason are not responding to your requests for questionnaires, name and shame them.
Well, I hate to sound like I'm being a backroom lawyer, but just if you be a bit forensic about that, her reply that it was aimed at the interviewer might apply to why doesn't somebody give me credit for doing an effing good job? It can't apply to the second clause, which is, well, others were sitting on their bottoms, right?
Yeah.
That's not about the interviewer. Now, that might be about the LEAs, it might be about headmasters, it might be about her predecessors as education secretary, it might be about the people who built the school, it might be about the opposition, but it can't be about the interviewer. So that definitely explains part one. It can't explain part two.
But also, she knew that she was going to get tough questions. I mean, what do you expect when you say to parents, no, you can't go back to school? I mean, that's the job, frankly.
Yeah, and, you know, this has not been well communicated, not least because some of these schools, it's only one classroom, and some of these schools...
It's just a corridor, it can be,
Kids were only out, I mean only, I know it's disruptive and I know it's half of parents, I don't mean to be flippant, but it was a single day of learning remotely. So, you know, they could have explained this a lot better. It's not the full 100.
In a very, very bizarre twist of fate, when I took my child to nursery today, he couldn't go into nursery because the ceiling had collapsed. How random
was that crumbling concrete or just...
No, what that was a burst water thing or something. Anyway, long story short, the ceiling collapsed. So we all turned up. They couldn't contact us parents because they had no electricity, apparently, so they couldn't email us. They had no phone, like database or whatever. So I can assure you it is deeply inconvenient when you have no childcare. But look, like I said, we're troopers on GB News. We're here anyway. And I want to talk to you next about Labour. You've seen today perhaps a shadow cabinet reshuffle. Have you paid attention? Do you know who's who? Do you care? Is this the next government in waiting? Were you impressed with what you saw today? We'll have that next.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, no, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion. People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment.
I came to GB News because it's the people's channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Hello there, I'm Michelle Dewberry with you till 7 o'clock tonight alongside me, the PR consultant Alex Dean and former Labour advisor Scarlett Maguire. David says, I'm a former school business manager and when I was in post, I had a full conditions survey carried out by a professional firm. He says where issues were uncovered within the schools, they applied for funding and they resolved their problems. He's asking perhaps should the headmasters have been a little bit more proactive perhaps in managing and maintaining their own schools. Interesting question. There's not a lot of love for the ITV team. Some of you are saying that you think that the ITV team set out to deliberately trap Gillian. Alex is having none of that.
No, look, I mean, I get some people will look at anything like that, like grasses. Why did you think on her? But any news team is going to gets this sort of thing. It's gold dust. You can't blame them in the end. You have to have a real rigour and discipline as an interviewee.
But it's like Gordon Brown and that woman.
Gillian Duffy.
Absolutely,
yeah.
which was in the car. And that was put out by Sky. And then John Major talking about the bastards.
Yeah.
Right?
Oh, excuse me. Tea time. Sorry, everybody.
Sorry. Talking about
George Bush, Yo Blair. Not speaking to the Prime Minister as he would.
It happens a lot, and it's standard practice that you put it out, and we don't blame the ITV crew.
My favourite of all of them is Prince Charles slagging off, I think it was Nicholas Witchell. As if you couldn't, I hate that man. Prince Charles as he was then.
Well, there you go. And, you know, I do think that Gillian Duffy one, that bigot thing, I think that was quite a big nail, actually, in Labour's coffin for a while, because I think so many working-class people felt disconnected to the Labour Party, which brings me on nicely, seamlessly, do you see what I did there, to my next topic, which is, of course, Labour have done quite a big reshuffle today. Did you see any of it? There's been quite a few promotions, a few demotions. Let's have a little look, see whether or not I can bring some of those up on the screen. And actually, it'll be interesting to see, I'll throw to you first, Scarlett, it'll be interesting to see whether or not this is, you know, is this going to be the team now that takes into next election? Do you think we'll have any changes before then or not?
There are not supposed to be any changes. So this is supposed to be the team that goes into the election, hopefully wins it and goes into government. That's how he's chosen them, right?
And do you look at that squad there and do you think, yes, that is the team that can win the next election?
I mean, I know quite a few of them. They are really, really good. I mean, I think it's great. And it's quite interesting is that I texted my sister about one in particular, and she said,
which one in particular? Get it back up on the screen, by the way, because I don't think people can speed read that quick.
Thangham Debonair.
Bristol East?
Bristol West, who's the new shadow Culture, Media and Sport Secretary, which is great because she was a professional cellist. Right. And so to have somebody who's really serious about the arts in it is great, actually. I mean, she was completely thrilled.
All right. Well, what do you make to what you see unfolding there on your screen?
Well, let's...
Do you feel threatened? As a Tory, do you look at that and go,
no,
that is who's going to cost me the election?
I don't, but there's one thing I think that's undeniable and should be said in the interests of being reasonable. This is plainly a much better team than Jeremy Corbyn had, right? And some people think that's damning by faint praise, and that's not how I mean it. What I mean it as, I actually think the Conservative Party has every chance of winning the next election, but if that was...
do you, honestly?
I absolutely do. Not just in a hung parliament, but winning the next election. And I think the country at large has yet to make up its mind about Keir Starmer. Yet polls are often wrong. Indeed, polls were absolutely wrong about Brexit for years before we had the votes.
But Alex, I remember I've been on the show with you when Labour were behind, and you said and if there's an election, you will lose. And now you're saying polls are wrong.
Well, that's what I can't remember at what point that was the case, but I thought that you would lose then, and I think you'll lose now. So my position hasn't changed.
but you said the polls.
I was seeking. Well, no, but my view wasn't based on the polls. My view was based on the credibility of the Labour Party, and I genuinely think that the Labour Party has improved in credibility vastly since the last election. So I'm conceding that. And I want to say one more thing in the interests of fairness, which is that, in my view, that is a healthy state of play. It is only right that the opposition should be ready to form government and should posture as if it's ready to form government. Jeremy Corbyn, in my view, never actually looked like he was going to take the reins of government. Keir Starmer is at least trying to position himself as if.
But I don't think that Jeremy Corbyn got an easy ride from the media, did he? I mean, he's not my kind of politics.
Neither is Keir Starmer.
That...
I don't think. I mean, it's not for me to defend the media or otherwise, but I think people are relatively consistent on that front. I mean, the media is consistently, in my view, slightly more hostile to the Conservative Party than to the left, but that reflects the broad left-wing, left-of-centre position of the media class.
I agree with Michelle. I was never a Corbynista.
Sure.
I do agree with Michelle that he did get a really, really hard time from the media and never got taken seriously in a way that actually, I mean, Boris Johnson was allowed to sort of just get in without.
Let's ask about this. Let me just bring it back to the shadow cabinet.
Yeah.
Phil says, why on earth has Angela Rayner been given such a prominent position? What do you think to the role that she's now got? She's basically got one of the positions that Lisa Nandy had. She's now shadow levelling up secretary and shadow deputy prime minister.
Well, so the deputy prime minister is because she's the deputy leader and she was elected. So I think that's quite straightforward. It's absolutely right that that's what he did. The levelling up. I mean, the thing about Angela is she gets levelling up. I mean, she's lived through there.
You don't think Lisa Nandy did?
I think Angela probably will do it better. I think Angela needs something where she really where she can really get her teeth into it. I think she wanted a proper delivery job. The problem with the Cabinet Office is it's quite amorphous. It's about government. Interestingly, they've got 3 people in it to look at government. But actually, when you do levelling up, I mean, I have a lot of time for Lisa Nandy. I think she's great on the media, but she was not making anything.
I've got to say, look, I 3/4 agree. On the half I agree with you on is that she was elected, and that's the system the Labour Party has, so there it is. The quarter I agree with you on is that she needed a proper job. You can't have a deputy and then not have an actual role, or at least you shouldn't. The part I don't is, I mean, Lisa Nandy, in my view, is a much better performer than Angela Rayner.
One of my viewers, Doug, makes an interesting point. He says, why are you referring to it as Starmer's cabinet? Why are you referring to it as Blair's cabinet? And there's been a lot of, shall we say, interest and conversation about just how many Blairites are in this shadow cabinet. I'll touch back on that in a second, but before I do that, let's have a look at the weather. I'll drop you a hint. It's going to be absolutely maffed in.
That warm feeling inside. From Boxed Boilers. Proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello, good evening. As we head into Tuesday, there will be a little bit of fog around tonight. Whilst in the southwest, we can expect some strong blustery winds, but the hot and sunny weather returns as we go through tomorrow because of this air of high pressure dominating the picture across the UK, leading to largely settled weather and dragging hot air in from the south. Meanwhile, looking at the details through Monday night, there is a front across the far north of Scotland, bringing some cloud and rain to Shetland. Elsewhere, a largely dry picture, clear skies, but some mist and fog patches developing, particularly towards the north and the east. Windier in the southwest, but many places seeing temperatures not dropping a huge amount, generally staying the mid to high teens Celsius, so quite a warm night to come. Bright start on Tuesday morning. Any mist and fog should quickly clear away. And then we do have that front I mentioned earlier gradually pushing its way further southwards, so turning a bit cloudy, a bit damp perhaps for Orkney in the far north of mainland Scotland. Elsewhere across the UK, lots of fine sunny weather, plenty of blue skies, and temperatures could be a touch higher than today for some, so highs around 31 Celsius, staying quite windy towards the southwest though. Wednesday's going to get off to a bit of a murky start for some eastern northeastern parts with some har and sea fret around. Most of that will burn back towards the coast, though the cloud could linger across the far east of Scotland. Otherwise, though, yes, it'll be a touch cloudier than recent days, but plenty of sunshine to be had. And with that, temperatures rising, likely to peak around Wednesday or Thursday, though the risk of some showers.
That warm feeling inside. From Boxed Boilers. Proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
There you go. I was right, wasn't I? I told you it was going to be Maftin, and it is. No one
What does
seems to know
mafting
what I mean.
You keep saying this word, but I don't know what it means.
You don't know what it
Mafting.
means. People in my ear are saying, what does
Mafting.
it mean? And you know, you have like a brief nanosecond there to say, I hope I've not just said something that I really shouldn't have said on national TV when you Google it properly. But it means like hot. It means boiling. It means warm. It means
uncomfortably or oppressively hot. It's true.
I mean,
Northern
it's
English. It's more broader than that.
Luckily for me, I am here to educate the nation.
Well, I appreciate
you can all thank me later. Anyway, the Blairite connection.
I mean, a lot of those people were in school when Tony Blair got in 1997. I don't understand this thing about Blairite.
Well, I think it's because 5 of them were special advisors in the Blair years.
Well, so if Yvette was, if we're going to go in for this,
wrong with it.
brown. No, she was brown. I mean, this is completely ridiculous. That yes, some of them were special advisors. A lot of them were still at school, and actually, some of them. I'm trying to think of it. I think Yvette was a minister under Blair and Brown. David Lammy was a minister under Brown.
Why be defensive about it? Having continuity in a party, especially one that's been out of government for more than a decade, having some continuity is a good thing.
I just think this Blair-Brown thing is just so boring. Is that actually what we want?
Doug, she's talking about you there. It was Doug's observation.
I know. Well, Doug, I'm afraid I think that it's not about Blair-Brown. It's about what we're going to do next. It's not about the past.
There you go. What do you make to that response? You get in touch and you tell me. But after the break, I want to talk to you about pensions. Can we afford all of these pensions? Are we paying enough? Do we need to retire later in this country? You get in touch and you let me know your thoughts.
The Live Desk with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Pip Thompson. It's here Monday to Friday on GB News.
From midday, we'll bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening, from across the UK and around the world.
Refreshing, feisty, but with a bit of fun too.
If it matters to you, we'll have it covered on TV, radio and online.
Join the Live Desk on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Dewbs and Co, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton, for 2 hours packed full of unfiltered opinions, unique takes and fiery debates. I guarantee you blockbuster guests and exclusive reporting with no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I think there is a culture of collusion, quite frankly.
And no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. That's Mark Dolan Tonight, Friday, Saturday and Sunday from 9. Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Like all families, we have arguments every now and then, but actually we agree on what the mission of GB News is, and that's the most fundamentally important thing.
GB News provides the kind of platform that lets all voices be heard. We don't hold back. We're free to say what we really think.
Just because some people who live in a tiny little Westminster bubble think that their particular story is important, that's not the most important story for me.
And often there will be difficult stories that you won't find on the establishment media.
Because what people think in the north of England may be very different to what they're thinking in the home counties.
We're going to carry on telling the world what life is really like for households up and down the UK.
We love to be in your car, in your kitchen as you're having your breakfast. Whatever you're doing, you are part of the show. If it matters to you, it matters to us.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Hello there, I'm Michelle Dewberry with you till 7 o'clock tonight. The PR consultant Alex Dean and the former Labour advisor Scarlett Maguire keep me company. You're a sensible bunch. I always say that about you guys. Kirsty says, I absolutely love that you just said it is Maftin. I was laughing because I knew, she says, no one down south would even know what you meant. Joanne says, I'm from Yorkshire, and indeed it is Maftin. And John agrees. You learn something new every day, a little tangent, because I honestly just thought it was just a word that everybody knew.
It's a stroke of brilliance, if I may say, because the concentrated minority that know what you mean feel special and love it, and the vast diffuse majority who have no clue what that word means don't really mind.
When he gets home tonight, or when he wakes up tomorrow and it's hot, I promise
it's mafting.
You're going to be sitting there going,
it's so mafting. The clothes are sticking to me.
Mafting. Yes, you see, I'll hear you.
I'll go into the office for the aircon just to get out of the mafting heat.
Yes. I'm not sure you'd say it in that. I wouldn't say, oh, it's mafting heat. You'd say,
it's embarrassing. I'm misusing it.
It's
Sorry.
mafting out there.
I know. You're going to have to learn to use it so that you can then impress everybody.
Mafting. I might do some linguistic lessons one of these days. I'll do like a nice phrase guide, a nice phrases of whole speak. And maybe some subtitles or something at the bottom one of these days to help you understand me. Anyway, let's talk pensions, shall we? Because one of the bosses of one of Britain's biggest funds, basically, has said that we need to double pension contributions from 8% to 16%. What he's talking about is the basic kind of contribution scheme where your employer has to do 3 and you've got to do 5. I think that's what he's referring to. A lot of people, of course, put a lot more than that into their pensions, especially those lucky folk who seem to work within the public sector, where employer contributions often are about 20-odd%, Alex. But anyway, are we saving enough for our retirement?
No, we're clearly not. But this is a position taken by Stephen Bird, who's the chief executive of Aberdeen. They've rebranded now, so they're Aberdeen. They took all the vowels out for some reason. Anyway, his point is that we are not contributing enough, and he's right. But his statement that we should double the obligatory contributions combined from employer and employee, in my view, it's more of a conversation starter. It's a provocation meant to trigger a public debate rather than genuine, because you can't in one go double the contributions required from people. It just takes up too much of the income that people are planning to use for their future. You can do it incrementally over time, and I certainly think we should move from the current kind of 8% minimum to at least 10% over time. But the notion we're going to move suddenly to 16%, I think, is just not realistic.
So what would you do then? Would you do, so if you've got a minimum of a 3% contribution at the moment from the employer, would you push that one up?
So
push the employer one up?
I think they both need to go up, and 4 and 6 would seem the logical place, one on each, and then perhaps see how that goes and see how the economy goes, and then push up again. But the more important thing, and there's a private member's bill in the House, I can't remember genuinely can't remember whose name it's down under, but there's a private member's bill in the House of Commons at the moment to bring the age for contributions down from, I think it's 22 to 18. Wow. And that brings another 900,000 people into the saving net, which is great, and it would give another 4 years of contribution. So I know that people when they're 18 are thinking to themselves, I don't care about my pension, I don't need to. I've got news for you, you do.
I know, before you know it, you go from your 20s.
The sooner we put it in, and the more interest you have on it, the better.
Indeed. What do you think to this? Do we even take it seriously enough in this?
No, we don't take it seriously, and one of the reasons is because you don't think you're ever going to get there. I mean, particularly when you're. I mean, you know, I remember having an argument with somebody when I was sort of in my early 40s, who said, "Well, I'd never hire anybody over 40." He is now in his 50s, and I'm sure he's regretting what he said. But young people don't ever see themselves getting old. I mean, look at The Who. You know, I don't want to get that the song. But I mean, what the other problem is that sort of people from 28 to 48. You're having children. You've got a mortgage.
Yeah, your priorities are the here and now.
Your priorities are here and now, and you're strapped for cash. Let alone now, where people, you know, masses and masses. I mean, most of Britain is strapped for cash, and certainly in that age group. And that is the problem. Is you don't take it seriously, and the only way to deal with pensions is to build them up.
See, that's why there is a genuine debate to be had here, and I'm not sure there's an absolute right or wrong, because it's quite paternalistic to tell people how to spend their money, right? And people are entitled to say, I should be able to control what my outgoings are, and I'm entitled to take on the risk about that far future in return for being able to buy a house, which may be an investment that I can cash in on in the future, spend money on my children, make investments for myself. Those are reasonable arguments. The trouble is, we as a country are facing such a shortfall in people's savings once they get to retirement age that we're coming so far short. I think the case for some intervention, some nudging is almost unarguable.
And what about the pension age in this country?
Yeah, so I would do three things, right? I would do that, moving the contribution age down. I'd nudge the minimum contributions up a bit, and I'm afraid, fabulously unpopular position on this channel, I would move the retirement age up a year or two.
To what? So what would you make it?
So, I mean, 68 is the current aim, and it's going to have to be 70.
But actually, that's fine if you've got a nice, sort of easy job. I mean,
sure.
if you're a manual worker, how long can you go on seriously working? I mean, one of the problems that we've got in this country, actually, is the level of sickness for the people of over 50. And The Spectator looked into it thinking that they were, I mean, a right-wing magazine, thinking they were going to do an article about lazy people over 50, all of that. Not for a second. We're talking long-term illness.
I saw Fraser Nelson's reporting on it. The trouble with this is, as soon as you say we as a country have got to save more and retire later, because our longevity's gone up not by a month or two, but by like a decade since we introduced the pension system, somebody says, yes, but what if you are an illiterate with a broken back and you are destroyed by the age of 42? Why, Alex Dean, do you want to make people wear sackcloth and in ashes? It's just crazy the extreme people take this debate to.
I'm not actually.
You weren't. I'm just saying that's what happens.
But I am
watch
saying
my Twitter feed.
it's a real. I'm saying it's a real problem. Look, I don't have a problem, working until I drop. That's absolutely fine. But you call this work, compared to what?
I'm not sure I'm ever going to retire. I'm not sure I'm ever going to be able to retire.
Absolutely. Do you want a teacher who is in there waiting to be teaching your class? I mean, there are a lot of tough jobs.
Sure.
And that's what it's. And there used to be. We had this thing called a retirement decade, which did seem a good idea. I mean, actually, somehow we've got to have a conversation so that the older people are not discriminated against, and it is accepted that they can do lots and lots of work. But actually, some of them can't.
Agreed.
That's what I'm trying to say.
That's why you need to stagger it over time so that it takes in effect. And I'm open to the discussions about having different tiers or categories of people. So those who've undertaken the bulk of their career in manual labour are either assisted into other work or have, frankly, an earlier retirement age as a compromise to help us to get to the position where more of us are working for longer, which is going to help society hugely, but will also help the individual. Retirement was meant to be a break at the end of a long career in which you got a little rest before, to hate to be blunt, we died. And the mortality rate in life is 100%. So there are people out there thinking, well, I should be able to enjoy a 30-year retirement. No, that's what's happened to one generation. We should regard that generation as having been very lucky rather than that being the new norm.
I think there's a huge disconnect, though, isn't there? Because if you just got like a normal average job, you might retire and be kind of OK. But then you will have people, and I'm sure some of you will be getting in touch now, you'll be talking about various different public sector jobs, final salary pensions. They're no longer a thing these days, but people will talk about gold-plated pensions. People will talk about people getting let go from various public sector roles and then being handed very generous pensions in the meantime. If you're long-term sick, particularly over 50s, we debated this on Friday, actually, about whether or not it should be harder for people to be able to claim long-term sickness benefit now that the world of work is kind of changing and you can do different kind of jobs. And I got a really interesting reaction as well from both the panel and the viewers. There wasn't like a huge amount of support, I don't think, for kind of changing some of the frameworks around those benefits, which I thought was interesting.
I just think if you are sick, I mean, it is really difficult. It's really easy, for us three to sort of talk about working forever, and I'm a lot older than you two. And like Alex, I won't retire. Work will dry up. But actually, if you're sick, and there are all sorts of illnesses that come on, to then say, oh, but you can do this and you can't do this. I mean, what about the people who are waiting for hip and knee replacements and can barely move now, and then they get then all sorts of things.
There's that saying, isn't there? One of the best cures for sickness is working freelance. Does that still apply? I don't know. You get in touch. gbviews@gbnews.com is how you get hold of me. I want to talk about prisons in a couple of minutes and whether or not there should be people in this country that are basically just in limbo. They don't know whether or not they'll ever get out of prison. I'm not talking about your whole life terms and your whole life tariffs, by the way. This is not that. We'll get into that debate, and helpfully Alex Dean happens to be a barrister as well.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dewbs & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m.
I'm not eating bloody cat. Are you
Delicious.
mental?
Open your mouth. OK, here comes a train.
Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Whoa! Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it. So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel. Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media.
We think different things, we've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference.
And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Hello there, Michelle Dewberry with you till 7 o'clock tonight. Alongside me, I've got the PR consultant Alex Dean and the former Labour advisor Scarlett Maguire. You guys, many of you are furious, and I won't mind, but you're furious with me.
I just assumed it was me.
No, it's me.
You'll always kick off that retirement age at me.
I feel like Gillian Keegan. I'm getting the blame tonight. Angry Paul, that's what he calls himself. For heaven's sake, will you stop all of this about pensioners? We've earned every single penny we've contributed. You won't be happy, Michelle, until they all starve to death in 5 layers of blankets in front of a single bar fire. That's a bit harsh. What have I said? Burton says, will you leave us alone? You're at it again, Michelle. Stop it.
I think it was me.
Susan says, no, we do not need to raise the pension age. I'm a waspy woman, and these extra 6 years were difficult. Lots of you say, Michelle, will you stop it with this conversation? It's not me. I'm merely commenting upon the news agenda. there. I don't even think I've ever expressed a massive view either way. I don't want anyone, particularly not a pensioner who has grafted their whole life. I certainly don't want you guys to struggle. So if you're going to blame anyone tonight, I think blame Alex. It's him that's saying that people should work
completely
long,
unrealistic.
That people
Life
should work
expectancy
until
go
they're
up and
70.
up and not see the retirement age change.
Yeah, there you go, Alex Dean. Direct your anger at him, not me.
AJC Dean, and Dean has an E on the end.
There you go, look at him. See, he's giving you his Twitter handle and everything. You know what to do
Just
anyway.
one more thing.
Let's talk about prisons, shall we? These things called IPPs, basically, Imprisonment for Public Protection Orders. These things have been widely discredited across England and Wales. They were abolished, in fact, in 2012, but not retrospectively. So you've still got thousands of people, basically, in prison that have no idea whether or not they will ever be let out and when.
Yeah, because you get an indeterminate life sentence, right? So the point about offences, for me, is that whatever, unless you get a whole life tariff, you know, for something like Lucy Letby did, there should be certainty about what your punishment is going to be. And these offences, these which were punished with imprisonment for public protection, vary quite relatively widely. It was whilst I was in practice that they were brought into being. But the point is that the majority of people being recalled to prison under these orders are not because they've reoffended. It's because they've done things like miss appointments with their probation officers. It's because they've failed to register their whereabouts, or they've even gone to their GP and said, yeah, this is what I'm thinking about at the moment. I'm relapsing onto drugs again and I need some help. And they wind up getting recalled to prison. And at that point, there's no framework to say when you'll be taken out again. So for me, the answer, I'm afraid, is obvious. We're only talking about a few, I don't mean to be flippant, there's a few thousand people who committed relatively serious to very serious crimes when they were first convicted, but everyone deserves certainty under the law. Those are, their sentences should be scrapped. After all, we don't believe in them now. You know, we're not passing any more of these things out. It's a fixed number of people, about 3,000.
So what would you do then? So you're saying you'd scrap the sentences and do what? Let them out?
No, you scrap those. Well, many of them are in the community right now, right? But they face forever, for the rest of their lives, the prospect of being recalled to prison in a way wholly different to people committing the same offences
So
today.
would you get rid of that?
So I would scrap the outstanding indefinite public protection offences, and I'd give them a stated, determinate sentence that is a length of time, and almost all of them will have served it.
Right.
For once, I absolutely agree with Alex. I mean, it was a terrible thing to bring in.
Yeah.
It was sort of lazy. It was trying to say, oh yeah, we'll let people stay in prison and then we'll bring them back whenever we want.
Yeah.
But it was badly thought through. It was then and when actually it was stopped, it should have been stopped retrospectively.
Couldn't agree more. And one thing to be aware of, and it happens with things like Dangerous Dogs Act 2, when all of the political parties facing a big news story, they all say, oh, we're doing the right thing, we're all clubbing together, this isn't party political, we all agree, pause and think.
Yes.
You almost always get terrible law.
Yeah.
But hang on a second, because I will speak out in defence, because surely it sounds quite sensible that you've got some person, they're not the worst of the worst, or else they would be in there, they're not coming out, so you've ticked that box. But isn't a little bit of flexibility a good thing?
No,
why?
Because it gives a coercive power and it gives an arbitrary power to a state which should never, because of its ability to imprison and punish you, have such abilities. The state's power should be limited and transparent. That the IPP is the reverse of that. It's unlimited and completely opaque.
And what's really important about it is it's not about breaking the law. So if these people come out of prison and they break the law, then they can go back to prison. That's fine. Yeah. But this isn't about breaking the law. This is about breaking the terms of their release that can be incredibly. I mean, as Alex said, I mean, somebody was sent back to prison for telling his GP that he was thinking about going back onto illegal drugs. I mean, this is absolutely, you cannot do it. And the thing about prison is most people in prison...
No, but there is an alternate argument, isn't there? Maybe try staying on the straight and narrow.
Hang on.
But he did.
But that is an example of the flexibility which you say you want. Because in the end, if you say, I just want to give open-ended flexibility to people with power over others, in the end, you will inevitably get an example that you disapprove of. And I presume you don't think GPs should be put in a position where they think, I'm going to shop my patient as required under law, which are going to see them go back, unless you want a kind of Stasi state, see them go back into prison.
Well, there are certain professionals that do have to engage criminal services. I don't know whether you might be a counsellor, and then you've got your patient.
Michelle, we're not talking about somebody who says, "I've got to confess, I'm back on heroin, and I'm having to steal to do it." We're talking about somebody who went to his GP and said, "I'm so depressed that I'm thinking of going back to drugs." Actually, what the GP should have done was send him to counselling and deal with it that way, not say, "Oh God, he's broken his terms of probation, he goes back." I think it's really, really important that people and the fact that we understand that this is a terrible law. Just because these people were unlucky enough to be done at the time.
In that period of time. Just so, Michelle,
well, the moral of the story is, everyone, just behave yourself.
Oh, come on, look, come on, be clear. The majority of people recalled under these old sentences have committed no new offence.
Well, you know what? You guys can have the final say on it. Anne says, Michelle, just to say that Alex Reid has a great laugh and it makes me feel cheery and it's a great thing today. She immediately then followed up and said, by the way, I do know that he is called Alex Dean instead. I think Alex Reid, isn't he that one that was like a cage fighter married to John? Is that
I get confused with cage fighters all the time. I see, you can see natural, you can see why it's happened.
Obviously, he's so macho.
Darryl says, Michelle, please can you discuss the article in the Telegraph today all about children turning up to school dirty and teachers having to launder their clothes? Apparently it's all about hygiene poverty. He says it's surely not about hygiene poverty, but surely about bad parenting. Please can you debate that? That's not a bad subject, that, Darryl, but look at the time. It flies when you're having fun, so that is one for another day. Thank you for watching tonight. Anyway, look, Scarlett, that's all we've got time for. Thank you for your company. Thank you, Alex, as well. Alex Dean, not Alex Reid. Anyway, thank you for keeping us company at home as well. Have a good night. Nigel Farage is up next.
The temperature's rising. Boxed Solar, proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello, good evening. As we head into Tuesday, there will be a little bit of fog around tonight. Whilst in the southwest, we can expect some strong blustery winds, but the hot and sunny weather returns as we go through tomorrow because of this air of high pressure dominating the picture across the UK, leading to largely settled weather and dragging hot air in from the south. Meanwhile, looking at the details through Monday night, there is a front across the far north of Scotland, bringing some cloud and rain to Shetland. Elsewhere, a largely dry picture, clear skies, but some mist and fog patches developing, particularly towards the north and the east. Windier in the southwest, but many places seeing temperatures not dropping a huge amount, generally staying the mid to high teens Celsius, so quite a warm night to come. Bright start on Tuesday morning. Any mist and fog should quickly clear away. And then we do have that front I mentioned earlier gradually pushing its way further southwards, so turning a bit cloudy, a bit damp perhaps for Orkney in the far north of mainland Scotland. Elsewhere across the UK, lots of fine sunny weather, plenty of blue skies, and temperatures could be a touch higher than today for some, so highs around 31 Celsius, staying quite windy towards the southwest though. Wednesday's going to get off to a bit of a murky start for some eastern northeastern parts with some Har and sea fret around. Most of that will burn back towards the coast, though the cloud could linger across the far east of Scotland. Otherwise, though, yes, it'll be a touch cloudier than recent days, but plenty of sunshine to be had.
The temperature's rising. Boxed Solar, proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more important,